Hello chess friends and welcome to Jozarov chess channel and welcome to a new chess strategy and tactics video. So in this video I wanted to show you 3 amazing endgames that have been played by the world champion Magnus Carlsen. In my honest opinion, Magnus Carlsen is simply the best endgame player of all times. Maybe we can have a discussion who is really the best player of all time. Someone says it's Bobby Fischer, of course. Someone says it's Garry Kasparov. Someone says of course it's Magnus Carlsen, and we can really discuss it till the end. But in my honest opinion, when it comes to the endgame stage, there's simply no match for Magnus Carlsen. His endgame technique is so brilliant. He squeezes always a win out of the seemingly drawish position. When he has a tiny little advantage, he will win the game for sure. And he is also making draws where he's supposed to lose. Maybe he finds always his drawish tactics in the endgame stage. So it's really wild how he plays this stage of the game, and that's why in my opinion, as I said, Magnus Carlsen is simply the best endgame player of all time. So if you want to study the endgame stage, just follow some Magnus Carlsen games. So let's see now the first example. Here it's Magnus Carlsen versus Levon Aronian back from 2007. Here Magnus Carlsen was only 16 years old. Really wild stuff how he already played the game. And here the problem I think in this particular position is obvious. Black has here dark square problems in front of the king. There are several weaknesses that white can attack, and also what is a huge problem is of course this bad bishop. We can apply the bad bishop strategy here also from white's perspective. The light square bishop is simply paralyzed by its own pawn. So these are, I think, the main issue in black's camp. These are the main positional problems. So how to punish this problem? So white to move, and maybe you can pause the video, as I said, and try to see the best continuation. One of the moves, and I would not love for you to play this move, we'll play this Magnus Carlsen idea. Of course, rook to b4 is here a tactical solution of the position, because bishop to b4 is really not a possibility. You get here dark square problems, and as we said, you can even probably checkmated around the square g7. The problem about this move rook to b4 is that black doesn't have to react. Black can play here knight to d5 and could have maybe a defensive idea here, could maybe somehow defend this position. So try to see now really different continuation. Try to see a more direct way how to win this particular endgame, because whenever you feel that your opponent has problems like this, dark square problems, or maybe even some other position light square problems, then we are trying to get rid of every piece that could defend the dark squares here in this particular position. So obviously the only pieces, the only minor pieces that could maybe defend the dark squares are of course the dark square bishop. So we're trying to get rid of the dark square bishop, and we're trying to get rid of the knight. The knight can also, we have seen, come on d5 and could maybe defend its position. So we're trying now to do this kind of an idea. So here Magnus Carlsen found a beautiful move, bishop to f6, and this is really wild because it forces immediately a trade of bishops, because here in the continuation Levon tried bishop to f6. After e takes f6, the serious threat is of course queen to h6 and queen to g7, a beautiful checkmate. So that's why Levon has to bring now the knight into the game, and Magnus scores simply bishop to e4. He attacks the further piece that could protect the dark square, because of course you cannot play queen to h6 immediately, you lose simply the pawn. That's now the main issue. So that's why bishop to e4. Levon goes into an endgame with queen to f4, bishop to d5, queen takes h4, knight to h4, and after e takes d5 here, rook to b4. Here Magnus takes now the pawn, now has now a situation where he has 1 pawn more than Levon Aronian, and has now a much better activity. But also what we can notice is that Levon has here a bad bishop, which is paralyzed by its own pawn structure, which is paralyzed by its own pawn. So this is now not a good piece in the continuation of the game. But still, I think many of us would mess even this up. So it's really not easy even to win this game, to convert this particular endgame into a win, because obviously black has also some chances. Black will get the rooks into the game, black will get the king into the game. So you have to now make really a beautiful strategy here. So in the continuation, bishop to c8 was played by Levon, because there are also some threats to play rook to a4, maybe doubling up here on the a file. Then the rook could be endangered, so that's why bishop to c8. And here Levon is trying to get somehow the bishop into the game, at least maybe to reroute it and fix the pawn structure here, also keeping everything compact with the move bishop to e6. Magnus goes rook to b6. We have rook to a3. Magnus protects the pawn, bishop to e6, and now of course knight to f3. We want to have a good control here. Magnus is searching for new opportunities for the knight, is rerouting the knight on a more active square on e5. So we have rook to a8. Magnus creates now breathing spaces for the king. We have now h6, knight to e5, and here after a couple of trades of rooks, Magnus goes now king to h2. We have rook to a3, and now the fun starts. So here Magnus first plays rook to b8. Look how he's playing the game. Really, really well stuff. Rook to b8, king to h7, and maybe now again you can pause the video and try to see now really the best continuation here for white, because it's so hard to see. I think notice that also the pawn on c3 is hanging. Many of us would be really annoyed already here by our position, because probably you would ask yourself the question, what happened to us, why we are losing now the pawn on c3. If we lose the pawn on c3, he'll have a passer on c4, he'll probably push it further. He has the bishop, which could support of course the potential progress. Maybe he'll promote the queen. What should I do here? Probably, as I said, many of us would start to ask this question. Many of us would maybe even lose this potential endgame, but not Magnus Carlsen. He sensed that he has here much better position on the king side, that he has here a pawn majority attack. He has now 4 pawns against these 3 pawns of blacks, and he's now searching for activities there. He's not calculating anything now on the queen side anymore. He's trying now a beautiful move f4, because if you manage to play g4, maybe f5 to deflect the bishop from the square f7, then if we pick up this pawn, then actually we are having the passer here on the f file. If we manage to grab the pawn on f7, maybe we can promote earlier than black is promoting his pawn on the c file. So that's why Magnus has to be now active, and he starts to push the pawns here on the king side. So in the continuation, of course, Levon takes the pawn on c3, but now a beautiful sharp move here by Magnus h5. What you can do if you play, for instance, g5, let's see what happens. Look what happens. It's really wild. f5, the bishop gets trapped. Actually, the bishop doesn't have good squares. You have to play here bishop to f5, but now after knight to f7, you get even checkmated. You're playing maybe rook to b3, but look at this, with rook to h8, you're getting a beautiful checkmate. Really wild stuff. So let's go back. For instance, after move h5, if you play rook to b3, if you try maybe to trade off the rooks, which seems like a logical idea here too, then h takes g6, f takes g6, and now we attack the bishop again, and we just push the pawn further, and again it's game over. So this is the way to go. The beautiful move that Magnus played is actually the move f4, with the preparation to play h5 and then f5. This is really brilliant how Magnus is playing the game. So rook to c3, as we said, h5. Here Levon tried g takes h5. Now Magnus goes with this rook. He's trying to attack the pawn. Notice that the king cannot approach to the structure, because the knight is taking over here on g6 and the pawn is taking over here on g7. So we have rook to a3, f5. Now this beautiful motif. Now Magnus delivers a check. King to g8. The king has to go on a defensive square on the back rank, and now with rook to g7, king to f8, rook to b7, Magnus is trying here a beautiful checkmate on b8. You have to now step back. That's not the main issue. Levon has to play a passive move, because if you don't play that, you get rook to b8. Notice that the knight is controlling here this square, and the pawn is controlling this 3 square. So with this check on b8, actually black is getting checkmated. Really wild stuff. Really brilliant technique here by Magnus. Rook to a8. Now of course, when the rook is passive, when the bishop is passive, when you don't know what you do, now the king can of course play much more active here. So rook to d8, king to f4, the bishop has to step back, g3, c3. Now a beautiful check by Magnus. Now a new check. Here we have king to f8, and now knight to d7. Brilliant move here by Magnus, and it's game over here, because look at this. For instance, if you play here king to e8, then of course you get rook to the e7, a beautiful checkmate. So that's why in this position, after knight to d7, rook to d7, and rook takes d7, in this position Levon Aronian resigned, because of course you have this passer, but Magnus can always catch up, at least get the rook behind, and here we'll stop this progress, and we'll get also our king of course into the game by playing king to e5, king to e6, and we're threatening also checkmate here on the back rank again. So really amazing technique. You see when it seems that something went wrong here from Magnus, when he lost the pawn on c3, finally he pushed the pawns, he created this pawn majority attack, get the piece activity, get the rook into the game, get the pawn rolling, get the knight actively into the game. Really brilliant endgame here by Magnus. So let's see now another example. Here it's Vishy Anand versus Magnus Carlsen, back from 2013. One of the immortal matches of the World Championships here, 2013 World Championship match between the two of them. Really wild stuff what happened here. H5 was the move here by Vishy Anand. Vishy is down a pawn, and he's trying what many of us I think would try to do, and this is the way to go. So far, not a mistake. Still, if Vishy makes correct moves, this should be drawish ending, because many of this rook and pawn endgames, although you're having maybe a +1 pawn situation, but still they're ending with a draw, because it's really hard to make a win here. The cool part about Vishy's move is actually that he prepared here really wild drawish sequence, because if Magnus would have played now the move g5, then Vishy can of course come with king to g3, here rook to c6. You cannot approach of course to the rook because you lose the pawn, and the king is always stuck to the 7th rank. Here Vishy would of course use this path for this king, and this should be a drawish endgame here for sure. So that's why after move h5 that Vishy played, Magnus has now to play g takes h5. Which is really the only way to make something out of this. Again, it's not winning, but at least here Vishy has stopped the pawn structure. He has created many weaknesses. These are double pawns. The pawn on f6 is also isolated, but now Magnus is thinking about the structure a little bit differently than we would probably think about it, because Magnus is thinking that actually these pawns can protect him. These pawns we can use in order to keep our king safe and move the king a little bit closer to the other side of the board. That was now really a brilliant plan by Magnus. As I said, again, I'm pointing out, if Vishy would have played this endgame in a proper way, this should probably end in a draw. But here Magnus is, as I said, he's squeezing this position. At least he's trying to do something. He cannot lose this one. We can agree that no way that white is winning the game. So when you have an advantage, just push a little bit. Maybe you make a draw, but at least you tried. I think that's also a certain idea that we have to think about in endgames. Maybe your opponent will even offer you a draw here in this particular position, because it's obviously a draw. But in my opinion, you should never accept a draw. Play 10-15 moves. If he makes a draw, okay, he made a draw, but it doesn't matter. You at least tried. That's now here really important to say. And Magnus is of course the main pusher when it comes to endgames. He's really squeezing, as we said. Here rook to d5, and he's now getting the king closer. We have king to g3, rook to b6. Here Vishy is staying of course on the 5th rank. He's not allowing here Magnus to come with the king into the game. We have now f5, king to h4. Again, Vishy is not allowing here the king come to g5. But now Magnus plays a brilliant choice. Again, I'm saying this is not winning, but at least he's trying. He's sacrificing now a pawn just in order to deliver a check, kick away the king from the 4th rank, and now to get the king himself here on the 5th rank. So he's trying to at least keep the king very active. Notice that so far this pawn on c4 is at least holding the 4th rank combined with the rook, because b4 or something is not possible, because you get here this one, rook to e3, and then you pick up this pawn, and then it's probably winning if we manage to grab one of these pawns here on the other side of the board. The king is now much closer. You get a check. You cannot cover yourself because you get f4, pardon me, h4 or something here. Then you lose the pawn on g3. This pawn is still weak, so this is not working. So it's now a different story. So now, as we said, after king to g5, at least this structure, the rook and the pawn on c4, are holding here the whole structure on the queen side. So in the continuation, rook to b8. Now Vishy is still playing the game correctly. He's trying to get the rook behind the enemy structure, and he's trying to deliver some checks and hopes for a perpetual, and a draw is perfectly fine. But now Magnus pushed the pawn further. He creates again new breathing spaces for the king. Now of course, after a couple of checks, you still have a room to hide. Now after rook to f8, we have rook to f4. We have now rook to c8. Now rook to g4. We have rook to f8, rook to g3. Now king to g5. Again a check. Now of course you cannot take, because we'll simply take it out, and now we have here 3 versus 1 pawn majority. This pawn, as we said, the pawn on c4 is holding this structure, so no b3 b4 moves are possible. Black is much closer to the other side of the board. Will promote here earlier the queen than white will do, of course, here on the c file. So far this is not possible to take out here the rook on g3. So we have here now rook to c8, and again it seems so that something went wrong here for Magnus, because he's losing now another pawn. But that was really brilliant choice by Magnus. He's left now this pawn on c4 unprotected, but now pushes the pawn further. And again, this should be a draw, because what Vichy should have played here is actually b4, and b4 is still draw because you can do now this idea. This was the only idea that Magnus Carlsen had here. He's trying now to push the pawn on the f file here, but actually this is not working because after g takes h3, now rook to g6, you are trying maybe to push the pawn, but now white can deliver this kind of a check. You can just play perpetuals and this should end in a draw. You can maybe try to get the rook again behind, but now with c4 you see white is protecting the position. Now you can maybe try to squeeze something out of this again with this kind of idea, but white is going simply behind his pawn, is trying always to check you. If you start to finally maybe get a rook into the game, you see nothing is possible because you just play checks and this should be a draw. So as I said, b4 in this particular position was the way to go. What Vichy was probably scared of is this idea that Magnus could have played maybe the move king to f2 and then maybe rook takes g2. So that's why Vichy tried to stay with the rook on the 4th rank where many of these pawns are. So he's not allowing Magnus to come closer with the king. But actually this was a huge mistake. And you see now how Magnus is playing this endgames in a seemingly drawish position. He makes now a completely winning endgame here. As we said, b4 was the move for Vichy to go, but now Magnus finally creates a passer that's really close to promotion. We have now h3, g takes h3, now rook to g6. Now here we have c4, now f3 here by Magnus Carlsen. We have here a couple of checks. Magnus simply pushed the pawn further. We have now this kind of idea. Again, Vichy is trying to go behind the pawn, but now it's not working because here after rook to g1 in this position, Vichy are not actually resigned. Because let's see now the possible continuation. You can do your check again. You can do a couple of checks, but now we're stepping simply to aside here, and there's no good way to make anything with just promote. And let's see even this continuation. Okay, let's see why this is also winning. I've analyzed also this particular position at home. You see, we just cutting off the potential ability to with the king to come into the game. Now if white of course starts to push the pawn further, we'll just play h5. Now we just kick away the king. The king has to step back here on g2. Now we pick up this pawn and the game should be over, and nothing here for white anymore to do in this position. So see again this idea, try at least to win this endgame, because let's go back. If Vichy would have played, of course, the optimal move, still we can play h3, and then we play this one. As we said, we can do always perpetual. So okay, at least we tried. We say you played a decent endgame. Now it's a draw. Okay, I accept your draw now. But here Magnus really squeezed it. You see, everyone makes a mistake. The legendary Vichy made also here a mistake, and Magnus Carlsen won a very important game in the World Championship match in 2013. Really wild stuff. So let's see now a third example. Here it's Vladimir Fedoseev versus Magnus Carlsen back from 2017, and this should be also drawish. But you have to be really a monster here to defend this position, because when we see this particular endgame and Magnus is now playing here with the black pieces, there are two patterns I think that are very important here to notice. The first pattern is of course this one. It's this wrong bishop that could happen in this particular position. This could actually happen. For instance, if the king marches here to a1 and we're giving up maybe the knight somehow for this pawn on b4, and maybe black manages to grab both of these pawns, still it will be a drawish position because there's no promotion when we have the wrong bishop. So the bishop is not targeting here. We don't have a dark square bishop that could target maybe the a1 square, so that's why it's a draw. What we should also notice is that white could lose the game even with the knight on the board when black is creating then the distant pass pawn, the outside pass pawn, then when the king is maybe too far away from the action and the knight cannot catch up anymore with the pawn, then also it is winning for black. So in this particular position that Fedoseev and Magnus Carlsen had in 2017, these are two patterns that we have to recognize. But now Fedoseev has only one chance, and this is really brutal how Magnus is playing the game. He's forcing you to play the best stockfish line just in order to make a draw. If you don't play the stockfish line, you will lose the endgame. That's how brutal these endgames are. Because maybe you can pause the video again and try to see a drawish sequence here for white. There is only one move I think that white can make in order to force a draw. only really wild one move that is possible, but Fedoseev in the game didn't play it. You see how powerful these endgames can be. Okay, the move that white needs to play is actually knight to b3. This is really wild. You're sacrificing the knight, but look at this. If you take or if you step back, we'll just play here knight to d2. Again, if you start to push, then we can even play knight to b1, attack now the pawn, and here we have the fork, and you lose the pawn, and of course it's a draw. So here, instead of this idea, let's go back after knight to b3. If you take a takes b3, then we just push the pawn further, and now we just get our king here towards the corner, and this is now a drawish endgame for sure. Nothing can happen, so it's game over also here for black. Black didn't gain anything, so it's a draw for sure. So you see, Vladimir Fedoseev has only one chance to play the move knight to b3, but he played knight to e4. Now Magnus Carlsen goes king to d5. We have now knight to d2, and now after bishop to g6, very nice move by Magnus. He's not allowing this knight to come into the game. He's cutting off the potential activity for the knight. This is the way to go. That's how Magnus is playing the game. He really deactivated the potential ability of the knight. So we have now king to e2. Now Magnus simply pushed the pawn further. a3, b takes a3, b takes a3. We have king to d1, and now we have a2. You have to play now knight to b3. Magnus gets with the king closer. We have now knight to a1, and now Magnus comes on a very active square, king to c3, king to c1, and now bishop to f5, h4. We have now bishop to g6, h5. You have to now make something, knight to b3 or something else. It's not possible. Even if you play something like knight to c4, we'll just pick up here the knight, and you cannot come closer, of course, with the king. So that's why here we have h5, bishop to h5. Now Fedoseev plays knight to c2. We have now bishop to a8 by Magnus, really brilliant move. Knight to a1. Here bishop to a4 by Magnus, and now again a beautiful move by Fedoseev, knight to c2. Now bishop to c2 is not working because it's a stalemate, but now maybe you can pause the video and try to see now again the best continuation here for black, which is winning. And then after that move, Vladimir Fedoseev immediately resigned. So pause the video and try to see here the best continuation. Try to win this mini endgame here. Okay, here Magnus played a beautiful king to b3, and this move is devastating. This is destroying here white, because you can play, of course, knight to a1, but now we play king to a3, and now there's simply no good move. If you play, of course, with the king, would get our king here to b2, get it to the knight. If you play now with your knight to c2 or b3, we just pick up the knight. Now you have to react, and now we promote the queen, and this should be game over. So really great how Magnus is playing this endgame. Really wild stuff. I'm not sure what to say. This is really immortal. You saw in both of these endgames between against Vichy and also against Fedoseev, it's a draw. But you're the one that have to search for draw. Magnus has secured a draw for sure much earlier, so he's now just squeezing the drawish endgame into a win. So really wild game, and in my opinion, really this is the way to go. This is really also psychological impact that Magnus has against this other top grandmasters. He's just pushing it there to the limits, and you see many of them are not reacting correctly, and then Magnus Carlsen will punish you for sure. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed these 3 examples. In my opinion, really brilliant examples how Magnus is playing the game. If you want to see more about endgames and more about strategies, check out my commented chess games and also my basics in chess series. Here's the link of our playlist, and if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and what to say, chess is the best, of course.